FPL Game Week 11, my final team selection decisions. In today's video, we're going to go through everything you need to know going into the Game Week 11 deadline. We'll have a look at some injury news from the press conferences today. We'll talk about some of the big questions around the likes of Erling Haaland. Should you be bringing back in Dominic Solanke? Who is the best captain this week with so many good options to choose from? All in Game Week 11 final decisions. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here as well. And it is Friday. It is, of course, a slightly later deadline for Game Week 11. So do remember that it's not until 1:30 on Saturday. There is no early kickoff. So a slight change. But of course, this final decisions video will be out as usual for you now as you are watching it. We're going to dive in and answer a few of the questions. This jumper seems to be reflecting weirdly in my camera. Apologies if it is. I was on the FPL show this morning, which is why I'm looking a little bit smarter. This is about as smart as it gets for us who work from home all the time. But anyway, let's get into the video. The first thing to discuss is the Salah versus Haaland transfer. Both of the 2 points are quite linked together. The first one is actually that we expect Mo Salah not to go on international duty with Egypt. It sounds like he's been exempt. The first game is being played on Astro, where Salah doesn't usually play because it is not good for injuries, especially when you're used to playing on grass. And then he's not going to travel because then he's only traveling for one game. They've also likely qualified top of their group for the African Cup of Nations qualifiers. So that's not necessarily fantastic just for this weekend against Aston Villa, although we have seen Arne Slot rest players before international duty, so he might be more likely to play 90. It also means that coming out of the international break going into Southampton away, he's likely to have had a full 2 weeks rest. Now, Erling Haaland has been playing a lot of minutes. He's then going to go on international duty. He then comes back to play against Spurs. Is it an obvious that because in Game Week 10 it went well for Salah and bad for Haaland that you should now make the swap? No. There is going to be no week where it is an obvious move that you should be selling Erling Haaland. And some of you watching will still be thinking, yes, you need to keep him because the City bounce back is surely coming at some point. And I completely agree with you. At some point, surely Manchester City are going to turn things around. However, when you're looking at the transfers, Haaland versus Salah this week is still really close. Aston Villa played in the Champions League, so there might be a little bit of fatigue there, whereas Haaland have played a Brighton team who did concede chances to Liverpool last weekend, but have had a full week off. For me, it depends what the other transfer are. If you're bringing in a Matheus Cunha, for example, into that forward line, or you're bringing in a Dominic Solanke in place of Erling Haaland, and you're selling a cheap midfielder that you don't like up to Mo Salah, then yes, I think that probably is still worth it. Again, I don't think I would be doing it for a -4. I would be doing it with 2 free transfers only, and only if the second half of that transfer does pay off. So if you're selling a Mavididi or if you're playing a Semenyo, then I probably wouldn't do it. But if you're selling, a Mavididi or a Dibbling up to Salah and you're bringing in a Matheus Cunha or something like that, I probably would do it. Looking at captaincy, this is probably the most difficult week for captaincy we've had. I am going to put Mo Salah just number 1, just based off the Aston Villa fatigue potentially from the Champions League with the form that Liverpool are in. Haaland is in number 2. I still really trust him. Heung-min Son is then coming in number 3. I really like him as an option. I do expect 70, 75 minutes from him. I don't think he'll play 90. And if the game is won, we might even see an earlier substitution for that. But I do still like it. Bryan Mbeumo in at number 4 because he's on penalty. It's a nice home fixture against Bournemouth, who are much better at home than they are away. And then we have Matheus Cunha in at number 5 with Southampton at home. Now, the obvious one that's not in this list that people are considering their captaincy armband on here is Dominic Solanke. I'm happy enough in my team just to own Solanke. There have been enough bad performances from him over the past few weeks that just the Aston Villa performance is not enough for me to go and put the captaincy armband on him. I don't mind it if that's where you're going and you trust that one performance against Aston Villa is enough to go and put the captaincy armband on. But for me, it's not. So he would probably be in at number 6 or maybe number 7 behind Bruno Fernandes. So just to discuss a little bit of injury news, just to add on top of Son. So what was said from Ange Postecoglou today, they said that they're managing his minutes and building him up. He played 55 last week. They played 45 last night in the Europa League. They're going to do what they can to continue to build him up. So I expect him to play more than 55, but probably less than 90. I think 70, 75 is a reasonable amount to expect. I probably wouldn't be buying Son this week, but if you own him, absolutely start him. Then looking at Manchester United, Luke Shaw is back in training. Now, that is not a direct impact that you're going to be buying Luke Shaw, but it does have a knock-on impact on the likes of Mazraoui and on the likes of Diego Dallo as potential buys this week if you are looking at Manchester United defenders. When Luke Shaw is fully fit, which might be after the international break going into Game Week 12, He is likely to be filling in at left back or left wing back under that new system, which means at right back, Mazraoui or Dalot is likely to play. Now, of course, they might not throw Luke Shaw back in straight away. He might play as one of a back three, which he's done in the past. But it does put me down of buying a Mazraoui this week. I still think Dalot is fine, but it does negatively impact both of those in terms of expected minutes. The final one we're going to have a look at here is Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer is getting better, said the Chelsea manager. Hopefully they can get him as part of a training session, at least on Saturday, with the game on Sunday, and then a decision will be made. That sounds like at the press conference on midday on Friday, he has not trained yet. He is still a considerable doubt going into the weekend, but there is positives that they are hoping that he can train going into the game on Sunday. So if it was me, Palmer is obviously not a buy this week, and as long as you have someone first sub, I would hold on to Palmer. The fixtures from game week 12 onwards, you will want Palmer back. I would not be doing Palmer to Salah. I have Palmer in my team and I am not selling him, even if I think he's a considerable doubt going into that Arsenal game. From game week 12, he's one of the best players in the game, and if you sell him this week, the only reason you should be doing that is if you are wildcarding over the international break. Then the rest of the injury news that we're looking for really comes from Arsenal, and it doesn't really offer anything, and Arteta doesn't really tell us anything. And once again, Arteta told us literally nothing, but I'm going to go through it anyway for the sake of the video. On Declan Rice, he literally said, I have to be very vague on that one. He hasn't trained yet. It's not clear if he's going to be available to play. And of course, if Declan Rice misses out, it makes the Arsenal defenders worse. It makes the likes of Gabriel, and if you have a Fabianski versus a Raya decision, it makes them worse. I can't offer anything more. I probably would expect Declan Rice to pull through and play, but we don't have anything more on that, and we're likely to get nothing more between now and the deadline. Next up is Martin Odegaard. Of course, we have seen them lack creativity going forward without him there. What he said is everyone that is in the squad is going to be fit and available to start the game. Given that Odegaard did play some minutes, I would expect him to be in the squad. And if he's going to be in the squad, that means that he's going to be available to start the game. So I would expect Odegaard to start this game away at Chelsea. Of course, not guaranteed though. The final one is Kai Havertz, who went off midweek with a bang to the head. We have to wait until tomorrow to see how they react. Kai Havertz had a nasty cut. Again, I expect him to pull through. I expect at least him and Odegaard to play. Rice is a little bit more uncertain with a broken toe, but given how big the fixture is, again, I would probably expect all three of these to start, but Arteta gave us literally nothing. Top players to buy is up next. David Raya is in at number 1 as the best goalkeeper. From next week, the fixtures look really nice. Similarly for Verbruggen at Brighton, the fixtures for Brighton from game week 12, really good as a good cheap option. If you want Manchester United, Onana, they have been not bad as defensive numbers. Going forward, a little bit mixed, but I don't mind him. I probably wouldn't buy him, but I can understand why some people want a Man United defender. If you're looking at Dalot, for example, he could be another option. Sanchez of Chelsea. The issue with a few of these is their fixture that they have this week, but from next week, the Chelsea fixtures turn. Sells is in at number 5 because he's probably my favourite long-term cheap goalkeeper. Just over the next few weeks, there are some difficult fixtures that are starting to crop up, which is why he's not quite as high up the list, but I still don't mind him. Should make some saves, and the old clean sheet is still going to roll in. Moving into defence, Aït-Nouri is number 1. Of course, a reminder, he is on 4 yellow cards. So have a little caveat of that if you are looking to buy him this week. Kanate in number 2, I really like him. I wouldn't be buying Robertson. I wouldn't be buying Tsimikas. They look like they're going to rotate based on what Arne Slot said in his press conference today. Trent as well, probably not worth the money anymore. Can hold for one more week, but if I was buying you, I'd be buying Kanate. Gabriel in at number 3 based on the fixture this week. If there was no Cole Palmer, I do think he probably is number 2. But I am probably just about expecting Palmer to play. There's such mixed reports on it. Gabriel away to Chelsea, number 3. Dalot in at number 4. Might be higher if Luke Shaw wasn't back in training. And Lewis Hall as the cheap option in at number 5. Moving to midfield, Mo Salah does go in number 1 based on the fixtures, based on the captaincy option. Bryan Mbeumo number 2 based on being on penalties and the long-term fixtures. Brennan Johnson number 3, my favourite way into the Spurs team still. Semenyo as a good cheap option in at number 4. Caveat, he is also on 4 yellow cards. And then Bruno Fernandes in at number 5. The reason he's slightly lower down is because of the price. If he was less than 8 million, he would probably be higher up the list. But right now, it's just a little bit too much to pay, I think, for him to be higher up the list. Then having a look at forwards, Matheus Cunha ranks in number 1. I've actually gone with Alexander Isak, who is a really, really big hot prospect for me in my team in at number 2. Forest away this week isn't fantastic, but then it is West Ham at home in game week 12. Like that a lot. Then we've gone with Strand Larsen as my favourite cheap option. From next week, it will probably be Danny Welbeck, although with the likes of João Pedro, Evan Ferguson, and they've got Jorginho Ruta all competing for those spots. Does put me off Welbeck and João Pedro a little bit. Larson does look nailed. Slanky in at number 4 and then Jackson number 5. Again, from next week, Jackson will shoot up the list because of the fixtures Chelsea have from game week 12 onwards. Having a look at the projections for game week 11. Having a look at the most likely teams to score a lot of goals. We actually have Spurs in at first at 2.9. So if you want to captain Slanky, Brennan Johnson or even Son, I absolutely can't put you off that. I don't think I'd be captaining Brennan Johnson. Maybe Solanke if you wanted it, or maybe Son as well. Next up in terms of goals scored is Manchester United. If you're looking for a Garnacho, a Rashford, a Ahmad, they are decent punts. The only issue is Ahmad would have thought to have been a starter, but he did go off with a slight knock. We don't know if he's going to be available going into game week 11. And if he's available, Garnacho probably won't start. But if he is out, then Garnacho will start. So it is a little bit more difficult to buy those. So I'd only probably recommend Dalot or Bruno Fernandes from Manchester United. You then have Liverpool coming in just above Manchester City, which is why the Salah captaincy may be slightly more appealing than if you are going on Erling Haaland. Wolves next in terms of goals scored, still with 1.8. Clean sheets, the benchmark we really look at is anything above 40% is a likely clean sheet. We don't have a single team above 40%. And the most highly rated defence this week is Spurs at home to Ipswich without Romero and without Van de Ven. That basically, if they're the most trusted defence, we can't really trust anyone for clean sheets this week. So despite you maybe wanting to look at Aït-Nouri, he's not a bad transfer in a Konate. I'm not necessarily certain defensive transfers are that needed this week. And then finally, just to wrap up, having a look at my team, I'm almost certain now I'm going to roll the transfer going into game week 11. I will be having a look, though, on my stream for potential team news of Manchester City and anything we hear on Cole Palmer. If Cole Palmer is ruled out, then I will just start Semenyo over him. If Cole Palmer is a doubt, then I will start Palmer and have Semenyo as first sub. There is part of me which might just start Semenyo over him, but I think Semenyo, unfortunately, is going to be rooted to the spot. It could be Wood that I could bench, but Wood is just one player of the month, so I don't really want to bench that. There is a lot of home fixtures in my team as well, so unfortunately Semenyo is likely to be the one that does sit on the bench. If Palmer doesn't play, he will come in for him. The only other thing to look at, of course, is defensively. I'll be keeping an eye on any early Manchester City team news. Rico Lewis is in at the moment. However, it could be Mykolenko that starts in his place. There is rumours, only rumours at the moment, that Jared Bowen is facing a late fitness test for West Ham. If West Ham are going to be without Kudus and without Bowen, it does boost the potential Everton clean sheet here, which might make me start Mykolenko over Lewis, who I don't expect to keep a clean sheet away at Brighton. The only other thing to discuss is the Fabianski versus David Raya decision again, because I think there's a probably 50-60% chance that maybe 70% chance that Palmer plays. I already have Gabriel. Everton are not scoring loads of goals. Calvert-Lewin actually hasn't been pictured in the training photos. There's lots going on there. It's a must-win game for West Ham. For 1 week and 1 week only, I plan on playing Fabianski over David Raya. That could change by the deadline. Semenyo could find his way into my team by the deadline, and so could Mykolenko. But this is where we're lining up at the moment. Of course, Greaves is ruled out. Captain is still on Mo Salah. Vice captain is still on Brian Mbeumo, as I did discuss in my team selection video yesterday. If you want more detail on what my team is doing and future weeks as well, go and check it out. I do think my team is looking quite nice. I did plan on selling Solanke. Maybe that's not necessarily the best thing. As I mentioned, though, Alexander Isak, Jackson, who is on 4 yellow cards, though, and Welbeck are the top 3 options I could look at, or I could just end up keeping Solanke. But this is the team. I think I'm likely to just roll the transfer. And that is all. Just a reminder of the deadline stream going into Saturday. It is a later deadline, though, 11:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. deadline stream. The deadline is 1:30 p.m. UK time. There is no early kickoff. Now, the clocks did change a couple of weeks ago in the UK, so if you are abroad watching this, do check when the deadline is in your country, but it is 1:30 p.m. UK time with, of course, a later deadline. If you need a little bit of content to watch on this Friday evening or Saturday morning because there's no Premier League and no deadline streams until later, please do check out my new podcast, Know the Score. I'll link it below. The clips are up on screen. Thank you all for the support. Everyone who's watching it is saying that they absolutely love it, so I appreciate that a lot. If you haven't tried it, please do go give it a try. The deadline stream is also already scheduled, so click the link above to make sure you click notify for when that goes live so you do not miss the final deadline before the final international break of the year until, I think, March is the next one. Cannot wait. Cannot wait. There are some breaks for the cup, though, but we don't worry about them. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Drop any questions that aren't answered about this final decisions video in the comment section down below. I know a lot of you are considering wildcarding over game week 12, so I will have a video out early on in the international break discussing a wildcard draft if you are looking to play it, because I do think it is one of the best opportunities left. Leave any questions you have, though, in the comment section down below. 2,000 likes to the aim, subscribe if you are new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.